Welcome to the Dominions 5 question and answer for the multiplayer YouTuber game that we actually have going at the moment. What we're going to be doing is we've got a whole lot of different questions on these different cards in through here. There's actually 21 questions, which is probably going to be more than what we can get through. So we're going to shuffle this up, and we're going to actually be going around the table, reading out the questions and going from there. So we've actually only got 4 of us at the moment. So my name's Daz Tactic.
This is Lucid.
This is Nook.
And this is Wadestar.
Great.
And just to jump in real quick, and we might get Sabouts and I See Me Before on the horn later, but fingers crossed.
And Battle Moose we're expecting as well, so we don't know where Battle Moose is. He was supposed to be here as well. Right, we're just going to shuffle the questions. We've got like a leading question that Nookrium's got on his to start with, so that's now been shuffled. I'm just going to deal these out, across to Wadestar and then one across to myself, and then we'll just ask these different questions. So, Nook, you're away.
All right, so we'll toss this out here, right? Bloop. And the question is, what are your favorite strategic/tactic games right now? Top 3 would be awesome. So,
okay.
Wadestar, kick it off.
All right. Well, let's see. Besides Dominions, I am enjoying Gladius, Relics of War at the moment. And although I'll probably want to revise this answer later, Eudor Genesis is still one of my all-time favorite strategy games, period.
No way.
And I only wish that Masters of the Broken World would have had a better UI.
What about Imperium?
Imperium, I played only a little bit of it, and I keep seeing them posting updates, and I'm really hopeful, but I just haven't gone back to it. I don't know why. I think I don't like it's still got basically the same interface as Masters of the Broken World, and even though the game's beautiful, and even though they made so many improvements to some of the mechanics on Eudor Genesis in Masters of the Broken World, it's still just that weird UI menu and the kind of convoluted graphics, and the animations don't seem to work quite right, and it's just a little finicky things that don't quite make me go to the updated version. But Eudor Genesis is a game that I got so much enjoyment out of.
Okay, yeah, no, it's funny because people often mention that. I mean, it's about it being the classic of the 3 that were built. Okay, that's only 2, Wadestar.
Yeah, I don't know. After that, God, I'm drawing kind of a blank. I mean, I like Civilization a lot. And
yeah, how far?
Yeah,
how old are we allowed to go here? Because I got some old picks for this one.
Yeah,
yeah.
Let me let you guys go ahead, and because I'm sure that you will probably pick my 3rd.
All right, so my turn to talk about it. So for me, it's a no-brainer. Number 1 is Age of Wonders. For me, is absolutely number 1. It's been my number 1 since the very first Age of Wonders came out. Number 2, I think, would be probably just as a game goes, and I don't play it that often anymore, but Distant Worlds. Just because it's so unbalanced and big, and just anything can actually happen. I just love it. I love procedural games, and the 3rd one, I love Dominions, but Dominions wouldn't be in my top 3. The 3rd one, I mean, if I had to pick one right now, it'd be Gladius, but probably Warlock. Modded Warlock would be probably my number 3, I think, but only when it's been modded. And same with Age of Wonders, to be honest. In fact, same with Distant Worlds. As long as they're modded, I like them. Okay, so across to Lucid.
I would probably say Dominions is my favorite, and it was one of those games when I first got it, I didn't really think so. But I think a lot of people, because multiplayer is hard to get into, if you don't really see the multiplayer side of Dominions, then you really think it's like, oh, this big, do whatever you want sandbox kind of game. But it's really the multiplayer that kind of constrains the game, where it makes it, challenging. And all the little, why do you need 1,000 spells? Well, you really only need it when you need a specific counter for something that comes up in a multiplayer. But so that's probably number 1. Number 2, I actually like Eudor Genesis. I actually wrote a guide on it a while back, so it's really hilarious that you mentioned it. It's such kind of...
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's probably number 2.
Where was that published? Is it still around?
It's a Steam guide. Yeah, it's on how to get... I translated there's not a lot of information on it, and the game was originally made in Russian. And so I went and translated a bunch of old Russian guides, and then, yeah. So I didn't really write it. I really just translated it and put it on Steam. But
even so, that's great. All right, that's 2. You need a third one as well.
3, I'm not sure. I like Factorio a lot. I don't know if it really falls into like strategy game, but
yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Good. It doesn't?
Doesn't count.
Okay.
No, sorry.
Got disqualified? Maybe
That
like,
one's out.
You know, I like Age of Wonders a lot. I've been playing it all the way since I was a kid with Age of Wonders 1, 2. The multiplayer thing, I've tried to play it with my brother, but we just never got it where multiplayer was fun. And the single player, it ends up being hollow, right? Because, I mean, you can beat the AI, but it's fun, but, you know, I don't know. I feel like the game for Age of Wonders for me, like, multiplayer would be fun, but then after like the initial exploring phase, like where you set up your cities and stuff, it kind of loses some steam for me. But I don't know, that probably would be my third.
Yep. Okay, back to you, Nook Room.
Well, we'll say recent one. My favorite recently probably is Phoenix Point, the new Julian Galb one. The guy that made the original XCOM is working on a new XCOM basically style game, and that one's looking to be pretty fantastic. It's still pretty early days though. As far as like favorites ever, Dominions 5 always kind of reminded me of the old Master of Magic. It has that same same sort of feel to it, and that's why I liked Dominions originally. And so Master of Magic definitely is on the list. And I have to have a third one, don't I?
And like Eudor Genesis, very disappointing re-implementation.
Did you ever do Death Trolls on Master of Magic? Do you know what I'm talking about?
It's been so long since I played that game.
Oh, yeah.
That I played it last when I was like 12. So it's been a while. It's one of those that it's a fantastic game. I love the game, but
if the last time you played it, you were 12, never play it again. It's gonna never live up to your expectation.
I always have this thing actually where I think if you had to travel to Mars, if you had to get in a spaceship to Mars and you could only take one game with you, what would it be? That's my even though you may not have played it since you were 12, it's probably the one game that you would take, you know.
Yeah. Right. Let's say Dominions 5 with the multiplayer. I'm having a lot of fun with it. Single player is a little different, but with the multiplayer, I'm having a lot of fun with this. And the strategy and the tactics is certainly top notch with a multiplayer game. So yeah, put that number 3.
Okay. Yep. Sounds good.
And I remembered some shout outs for number 3 for me, which is obviously, although I never played anymore, Master of Orion 2. And let's see. And Heroes of Might and Magic 3.
Oh yeah, that's an old classic, isn't it? That was the best of the series.
I hate to name classics, but at the same time, it's kind of like anytime a clone of one of those kinds of games comes out, I'll kind of get into the clone. Like Stars and Shadow. It's kind of hard because it's kind of hard to say that's one of my favorite games because it's just kind of like, well, Master of Orion 2 is got a special place.
Yep.
It's still a fantastic game. That's one I played when I was 12 a lot, and I still play now.
Huh.
Okay, so Wadestar, you're away with the next question.
Okay, let's see if I get this right. Okay, can we see it?
Yep.
I can certainly see it. Okay, let's see. Now I just got to get it oriented so I can read it. What's the first computer game each of you played that really got you hooked? For me, it was Civilization 2. Wow, I love that game. It's still my favorite of the series, though I can't play it these days. Of course, there have been a million other games since then, but that was the first for me when I was 40 or so. From Bill Garthright.
So this is it's an interesting question actually, and I left all that in there when the questions together.
You cut out just for a sec, Daz.
Oh, okay. So is it okay now?
Yeah.
I've left all of the flavor text in there because it sort of gave a lot of context, I think, because I don't know about how old you guys are, but I'm in my mid-50s, so Bill and I are probably sort of used to the same sort of old games. But so It's a good question. So anyway, I guess I start off in this with answering this particular one. So first computer game, that really got me hooked. Well, really, it was the first one that made me sort of like I'm a graphic designer or a graphic artist, and so I was used to using Macs, and the first game that made me switch from Mac to PC, which was really in the very, very early days, back in the pre-internet days, and it was a bad move professionally, but a good move gaming, was actually an old game called Battle of Britain, which I used to even flying the planes. Do you really? It was an old DOS game, and
I used to play it on Sierra Online.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it was a flight simulator, but I just couldn't stop playing it, and that was what got me into getting a PC rather than a Mac, and it was never looked back as far as the gaming was concerned. So that's the one for me. Okay, across to you, Lucid.
Trying to remember what it was called. Oh, I remember. Lords of Magic. If any of you played that.
Oh yeah, yep.
My I remember it was still the first one it came out. You would still have to load like 8 floppy disks or whatever into your computer to get it to play. And my friend, he was using DOS, so it was like a type interface. And the old days of when you would, type in some command lines and, just text on your screen, and all of a sudden this game pops up, It seemed like magic at the time. But anyway, yeah, that was probably it. Have y'all played that game?
What year was that? Was that early 90s as well?
I think
Yeah, let me see. They posted in here. Lords of Magic.
Oh yeah, I remember that game.
Man, I don't think I do.
Yeah, there was more than just one, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Well, there's more than one Lord.
Well, there was a special edition where they had it was like an expansion pack. But yeah, it was made in...
That joke fell very flat.
No.
97.
97?
Okay.
97.
Oh yeah, it's on Steam.
Okay. Oh, hang on. The Steam, you can't rely on the Steam dates for those sort of games.
This is from Wikipedia.
Oh, okay. All right. No, they're usually pretty reliable. Okay. So that was yours. What about you, Nook?
Okay. Favorite game that got me into it. I'm gonna go with the original Master of Orion. Probably got me into strategy games. Before that, I played things like Wayne Gretzky hockey and stuff like that. But that was the first strategy game that I really got me into it. I have older brothers, and they're always big into like Civ 1, that kind of stuff. And when the first Moo came out, that was the first game that I actually sat down and got me into these style of games. So yeah, put that at my...
It's funny, I skipped Moo altogether. Moo 1 I skipped completely. I was playing a game called Stars at the time, and I preferred that. Did you guys ever play that?
No.
Master of Orion is I think it talks about stars, and it's like its influence for the game or whatever.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so.
I had friends that were trying to convince me to stop playing Stars and play Moo, but I just couldn't stop playing Stars. It was in hindsight, like it was an unplayable game. I tried playing it a few years ago, and it was just it's interesting game. The actual name was Stars with an exclamation mark at the end of it. So okay. Across to you, Wadestar.
Yeah, it's interesting he mentioned Civilization too, because that's when I got into Civilization, and that was the same year I also played Master of Orion. But even before that, I think probably the most impactful computer game I ever played, as far as getting me really, really into games and probably led me down the path towards programming as well, was Heroes Quest, which was later called Quest for Glory, the very first one put out by Sierra Games. Let's see, that would have been like 89 or something. And it was like all of a sudden, like they made Space Quest, so they made all the story puzzle games, but this was one where like you actually had a character sheet and you got to choose between a fighter, a wizard, or a rogue, and you chose all your skills, and like there was combat and all this stuff. And I just remember that game was like, it's one of those games that like when I saw it, I was like, I got to get this game. I've got to get it. And Yeah, I just have extremely fond memories of it. And then after I played it, I was like, that's what I was trying to make, that kind of game, and that's what got me into programming.
Okay, wow.
Civilization 2 and Master of Orion got me a 0.0 in calculus.
That's funny.
Not as fond a memory.
Okay, so my question is actually from Wadestar. What are you doing in here? So Wadestar, you put a question in. So what it is?
Oh yeah,
you did too. This one relates to our multiplayer series. How does the time it takes to play turns work with your various real life commitments? Okay, we start with you, Lucid.
Oh man, that's a good one. I was in. There were like 2 months. Not this past month has been kind of easy, but before that, I think I was in 6 games, and 3 of them were in the late game, and I was like a huge nation.
Oh man!
Each of my turns took 3 hours, and that's like me sitting there thinking, like, how the hell do I win this? It's gonna be impossible. There's 4 people attacking me. Yeah, that was tough. I don't like slowing it down, but I think we had to move all the game timers for those 3 games. Eventually, like once we were past turn 80 to like 72-hour turns. But yeah, I don't know. I think it depends on where you are in the game, and there's like I think I've had like a bad time in my life where I think my girlfriend broke up with me and I was having like a ton of stuff going on at work. And I end up staling a lot. But normally I try to normally you can find an hour a day to do a turn. But it's when it's
that was all in that one period, was it? Yeah, went through all of that personal stuff as well. Yeah, that's sad to hear.
Yeah, but anyway, I think you can normally manage it.
Yep. Okay. So across to you, Nucrium.
Well, YouTube's my full-time job now, so.
Oh wow, that's great.
Doesn't really affect my. That's what I do. So.
But it is different getting into this kind of a series as opposed to doing these other kinds of series or collaborations, I think.
Yeah, this is actually the first collaboration I've ever done.
Oh, fantastic.
So, yeah, but yeah, it does take a long time. Each turn probably takes about, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour, I suppose.
Geez, I'm already up to well over 2 hours per turn.
Dads were at war. That's scaring me.
It's all the graphics I got to do.
Oh, okay.
My tactics rely on not thinking and just impulse.
Okay, so it doesn't really impact your real life commitments then?
No.
Yep. Okay, that's really cool that you're able to do the YouTube full time.
Yeah, just a few months ago.
Oh, fantastic! Congratulations.
Not only time, but full time.
Yep. Okay, that's really great to hear. It's heartening to hear actually because it's hard to make it work, and it's sort of it changes so often. So yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, Wadestar.
Yeah, for me, my turns, it's hard to measure because I just find I need to get away from the game and think a lot. So I'll make a decision, sleep on it, and then come back and just change it completely. And I'm trying to be less like that. Before, when I wasn't working, it was really bad. But yeah, I think if I can bang it out, I can bang it out. Honestly, it's different, I think, when you play this game in a collaboration like this, as opposed to if I was just playing it off camera. Like if I was playing it in my private time, I think it would go faster. Like I think I would just do it and send my turn and not really think about it. But because we're playing it online, I have a little bit more pride involved. And so I have to not only just play the game, but I have to think about how am I going to explain what I'm doing to my viewers? that actually takes some time too.
Well, particularly with the way that you've been writing your your diplomacy.
Yeah, you have a translator there.
I have it. I have source material, but Yeah, but so like now I work full time, and that's actually been good too, because before when we were playing it last fall, like having too much time on my hands and then being able to dedicate that kind of time to the game was actually in some ways kind of stressful. Whereas now it's like, well, I can get upset and salty, but I have to go to work now and think about something else. So that part's actually very good, having your real life commitments.
Yep. From my perspective, it hasn't really impacted too much. I think the only real life commitments that it's actually impacting is my other recordings. Like I purposely don't get into anything too intense with the gaming, because this is by far the deepest thinking game that I've got to play at the moment. So that sort of chews up a lot of time. And as I say, it takes me a lot of time to actually play each turnout, because I've got to make sure I get all of the messages put away into these other different programs, and then I've got a big battle map with stuff all over it, with all of the different, every move that's been made basically is on a battle map, the same battle map that we're playing on here, but it's got everything all coloured in and all sorts of stuff. So it's quite involved, and so the actual real life commitments, it doesn't impact what I do. In fact, it's sort of funny you mentioned that when you go to work, it's that's when you think. I actually, when I go to the beach, because I go to the beach every morning for a swim, and on my bike, that's when I think about the game and just think about what I'm going to say, what I'm going to do, and all things like that, which is good. It's good thinking time. But yes, even though it does take a lot of time, it's other recordings that are taking a back seat rather than the real life. Okay, so next round of questions. I'm just going to go and deal another card out to each of us. So we will deal one out to Nookrium, one out to Wadestar, and one to myself.
And I don't think we explained it, but I'm not reading any of the cards because I don't have Tabletop Simulator for any of the viewers. But
shh, don't tell anyone.
They can't tell you're not here. There's a big...
Somebody's going to ask, like, why isn't Lucid reading questions? I don't want them to think it's like I'm illiterate.
Okay, Nookrium, you're away.
All right. I understand Wadestar started this whole thing. How did that come about? And has it led to any romance or hate between players?
Okay, so this is from JP.
Yeah. Let's see. It was actually me and Dwarf Comics started it. And it was just like, I think I've said this in the videos before, but I was just watching Dominion's videos and I found a channel called It's Moo, and I know he's gone back to uploading games again, and he was playing multiplayer, and I was just like, oh my God, I got to play this game multiplayer, because I got really absorbed watching him. And like, I know this specific moment was he sent a message to another player and got a message back. And that sounds really silly, but I was just like, that just changed the whole game to me. It was like, oh my, I mean, of course, you know that you can send messages to players back and forth and stuff, but at that point, I just saw the game now completely differently. Like I saw it for real, like a multiplayer game, and just realized how incredibly, how much more fun it would be to play multiplayer. And so yeah, then Dwarf Comic was just somebody I knew online, and we put together kind of a proof of concept with our 2-player game. And then that's when I told him, okay, so we have this proof of concept, so we can kind of show this to anybody else we want to rope into this. And then that's when I contacted Daz and Marcus and Sabouts and all the other guys who we've talked about, Tokshin we talked to, and etc. And that's when it just kind of took off. It was going to be me, Dwarf Comic, and Sabouts. And then Daz, you wrote back and said you were interested. And so we restarted and worked you into the mix. And it was a big learning experience because that first game was pretty rough.
It was, but you managed it well. I mean, I guess I'm the only one here from those early days that sitting on the other side of the fence. And I know that, like, I often get asked to participate in different things, and my general response is that I don't have the time because I don't like committing to multiplayer games. But the way that you presented it, and you could just tell that it's just going to be super well organised, and it is. The way that you've done it is just incredible. So Anyway, did you want to address that second part of it about?
Any romance?
Or hate?
Not romance. I wouldn't even say bromance either. Hate? No, I mean,
Had to think
I was
harder
really
about that one, didn't you?
I was very salty with Battle Moose after the Middle Age game for quite a while. Though I never told him. I never told him because it's a game, right? But that betrayal in Middle Age when I found out that he'd been working all that time to get me and Marcus to fight each other when I'd been trying so hard to work with him to take out Marcus. Ooh, I was so salty about that. So,
We all were.
but,
Yeah, we were all hoping that you guys would have a massive war.
I know. But he was the one. That betrayal stung me the most, though.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's really funny. But yeah, from my perspective, I mean, I've really enjoyed getting to meet the guys in the mix, and you do get to know them much more than just players in a multiplayer. And I think it's actually a lot to do with what Wadestar set up with the with the groups that we like. We're in Google groups where we sort of share a lot of information, and that goes a long way to I think sort of keeping the out of character voice. I think is so critically important to keep things moving along. And for me, that's been one of the great aspects about this is where so from that romance side. You do feel much more connected and close to the different players. And I think it all comes down to what Wadestar had set up at the very, very start with the way it was sort of all organised. And I know also when there's issues, there's emails that are sort of sent around. If people are struggling with something, there's usually emails that sort of go out to sort of make sure that everything's okay from an out-of-character sort of voice, which is great. So from my perspective, even though you get angry with the game, I can't think really that it's that it's ever become personal, if you know what I mean, from my perspective anyway. So yeah, for me it's been a really enjoyable experience, but that's largely to do with what Wadestar did with the whole setup and the way that he's sort of managed the whole process. Anyway, across to you, Lucid.
Well, I don't know. I don't think there's any romance or hate in this particular series yet for me. It's only 19 turns in, though I will say I do feel somewhat betrayed by you scheming player. Actually, I know I'm not totally sure. Nukrim, who are you playing?
I'm Satis.
You're Satis.
Oh yeah, we never actually did that, so we should do that real quick and remind people who are watching.
Okay, yeah,
So,
I'm Mictlan.
And I'm Vanheim, or not Vanheim. I'm sorry, Midgard.
Midgard, okay.
That's a lie. There are no elves. Midgard is ruled by Vikings.
That's right.
There's no elves here.
And I'm playing late-aged man.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say, like other games, though, has it led to kind of romance or hate? Generally, no. I think the like when I first started, it's really easy to take multiplayer like battles and betrayals personally. Like, oh man, they totally betrayed my confidence. The more multiplayer you play, though, I think it's a lot. Have any of you heard of a tabletop game called Diplomacy?
Yeah. It's that, isn't it? That's what we're playing.
Yeah.
We're playing a really cool version of Diplomacy.
Yeah, and it's the thing is, it was once said that a perfect game of Diplomacy would never end because people would constantly betray each other to keep the game state in balance. And I think once you accept that, then it's like, well, it's also kind of like Survivor. You have to work together to like stay on the island.
Yeah, yeah.
But you also have to be ready to betray people, otherwise the game state will get out of balance. So I think once you think about it that way, like everything becomes less personal. So anyway.
They're two great analogies. I got to say that they're great analogies for the way the game sort of runs. But that saltiness actually with Dominions is something I saw. I've only ever played one or two multiplayer games outside of this series, and in both those cases there was a lot of people got pretty cranky.
Yeah. And I think too, like that. I'm glad you said that, Luce, because I was going to ask, because you've played so many more multiplayer games than any of us of this particular kind of game, and the only other analogy I'd compare it to sometimes maybe is like Weakest Link, where it's like sometimes, because I think in our game, in Weakest Link, it's always the smartest people who get like kicked off the show before it comes down to the final round. Or did you guys ever see that show?
I saw the UK version, but only a couple of times.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
seen it.
Yeah, so it's like sometimes I think Dominions can kind of be like that too, and I think sometimes like Survivor's like that, where it's like
Yeah.
a little bit of a popularity contest, but it's also kind of like, well, we got to go and kick off the guy who's going to be the biggest threat because I'd rather fight this guy in the last round than this guy.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
totally like that.
Yeah, and it's but I think that from what I sort of saw in the other players in the multiplayer games that I did play with it, it was the players who trusted like another player somewhere, and then suddenly the betrayal came, and then it was just
Yeah.
rage quit time.
Yeah. That's one thing I like about having us all on YouTube though, is that like we can't rage quit. Like that would be the only thing that would actually make me on a personal level kind of irritated, is if anybody just dropped out of the game. I mean, it's different
Which
if you're like
that
down to
happens.
like your cap circle. Oh, go
And
ahead.
not for I mean, people rage quit in Dominions. I mean, I
Yeah.
probably at least half of the games I'm in, one person I have to go find a sub for them because they get angry and leave.
And don't go AI.
Well, the thing is, when you're in a game with good players, you don't.
Yeah.
Like, you don't. We ask people not to go AI.
Yeah.
Because it will really mess up the game. Like, because
Yeah.
the AI
Yeah.
doesn't engage in diplomacy. So I'll go find. I have a lot of friends that play Dominions, so I can usually find a sub. But
Yeah.
See, I think it's okay if like you're getting raffle stomped and you're kind of like, the writing's on the wall. Because like at a certain point, when your empire is starting to crumble, it's sort of like everybody has to attack you, or else they're
that
going to
was
be
like-
weaker.
Like Dwarf Comical in the last series, like really at at
Yeah.
the stage where after we all smashed him, there's no point. There's just no point.
Yeah. So with that one caveat though, like otherwise the thing I like about it being on YouTube is like I gotta keep going. Like I can't
Yeah.
quit.
Yeah. Okay. So that was I think it's your question now. Is it Wadestar?
Oh, yeah. Here we
Hang
go.
on, did we go around the table?
No, I didn't answer. I didn't say
Oh,
if I had any
go ahead.
romance or hate, but I
Oh,
don't.
okay.
So
Sorry.
Just for serious, I mean, I wasn't in the earlier to mid age, so no new romances brewing over here or hate from my side. I would like to say that I really like the way that we have the diplomacy set up to where we're not allowed to talk in game outside of the game, So
Yeah.
all in-game chat has to be done through the message system, which I think is great at keeping things.
There's a question about that actually coming up, so hopefully we'll get to that. We'll have the time to actually do that while we're doing this session.
Yeah, we'll just edit that out and stick that in at the end of that question.
But it's a good point. It's an interesting thought. Maybe we skip to that at some point. So anyway, okay.
yeah,
Where's
let's
my
make sure
card
we
go?
don't not do that question before this whole thing ends.
Yeah. Yep.
Bonk. Okay. So who's reading this one again? Me?
Yep.
Okay. How is everyone liking the MP game thus far? Is the slow pace beginning to get to anyone yet?
Yep. And this is from Sketic, who asked this question.
Yeah, Sketic, yeah. One of our very dedicated viewers.
Yep. I think he's a sort of fan of a lot of our channels, I think.
Yeah. I think we probably all have commanders named after him too.
Actually, it's funny. I've just in turn 20. Somebody had actually not in turn 20. In one of the recent ones, Chris Lighthawk was another one that everyone's got a commander named after Chris Lighthawk.
Yeah.
And someone wrote a comment that any faction without a Chris Lighthawk commander isn't a real faction. Something like that, which I thought was really funny.
You had Bill Garth right there before. He's one of my commanders also.
Oh, okay. There you go. That's great. So I guess I kick off. How's everyone liking? Yeah, I'm finding this one probably as enjoyable as the first one. The second series I didn't really enjoy that much. It sort of got really hard, and I think a lot of that was to do with that comic I was trying to create for it. It just became so time consuming. It was taking me like a full day to do each turn, which was just crazy. But I really like this. It's been good, and I really like the like everyone that's sort of been involved. It's been fun. It's like as we were talking before about the out of character voice, and I mean we're doing that right now with this sort of with this live stream, but or not live stream, this podcast type thing. It's just been an enjoyable experience. So yeah, no, it's good. And as far as the slow pace, we were talking a bit off screen about this, and I do get I lose track of what's going on, but luckily I do actually have like the war room set up so I can see what's going on strategically, and also every single diplomatic message I've got stored away is in a special like a timeline thing, so I can actually really quickly review what I've agreed to and what other people have agreed to as well. So it's sort of that's made it doable. But if I didn't have those tools, I'd be completely lost, I think, with the slow pace. But with those, at least I can do a review before I start. So that's where I am. What about you, Lucid?
It's pretty slow. I think there was a period too where I was probably like one of the last 2 or 3 people to finish their turns, which usually is an indicator of like how into the game you are. It's like, are you the first one finishing or the last one? But yeah, I think it's like you said, Daz, you stop thinking about it, or you have to like refresh yourself if a turn goes for like 5 days and you haven't seen the past one, and it ends up being like a chore almost to do sometimes. So
yep.
This last turn it posted, I did it right away because I was trying to like get myself back into the game and like all that. So I think picking up the pace makes it a lot more fun. But it's fun so far. I mean, I can't exactly complain.
Yep. Okay. So Nookrium.
Well, yeah, it is slow. I think the one part to it being slow is all of our videos seem to come out at a nice pace, rather than having everyone's episode turn 15 or whatever coming out all on the same day. It's sort of scattered a day apart.
Actually, I hadn't thought of it in those terms. That's actually a good way of thinking about it. If
someone's watching everyone's point of view, it's a little bit easier to handle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, good point.
That's a good point.
But other than that, yeah, I wish it was a little faster.
Yeah, I think for me, the slow pace in the beginning was more an issue for me. Like, I really wanted us to bang out the early expansion right away. But the problem with these multiplayer games too is just that the more people you bring into it, the more likely you're going to have at any given time somebody who's moving slow because of some kind of outside real life circumstance. And so yeah, I would like it, I think, to go a little faster. The only upside, or not the only upside, but the upside that I focus on when it does go slow is that it gives me more time to kind of think and cool off a little bit, like because I do get salty when I get attacked. But yeah, like it gives me a little bit more time to think too, because I still feel like as soon as I load up the game, read my messages, and then start playing out my turn, like those first initial decisions are always really bad. And then I get to sleep on it, look at it the next day, and then I'm like, okay, this was a terrible idea. Why would I do this? And I have some of those moments in my video too, where I like revise my turn. And I know, Lucid, from watching your videos, sometimes you do that too. Like sometimes you'll like kind of be playing your turn live instead of going over what you did previously a few times.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's kind of a catch-22. Like there's good things about it when it goes slow that I enjoy, which is that I get to think about it a lot more slowly. And I don't feel like I forget anything either, like you guys are mentioning. So that's a little different for me because I think I do kind of obsess over it more. But on the other hand too, all the reasons you guys are saying as negatives, like I feel as well. And sometimes too, it's like I want to start another game. Like, so there's that element as well. Like sometimes like halfway through the last game, like I'm like, oh, I want to do this for like the next Dominions game. So yeah, I want it to go faster in that sense.
Actually, one question to all of you guys, just a bit related to this, is how many times have you relied on the slowness to actually review your turn and then re-upload? I know for me, it's been almost every turn.
Lucid?
I don't know. I mean, I know I'll do it later. I think with it this early, it's mostly just kind of playing out your turn. I think with some of, I don't think it's any surprise. I've been in some kind of very awkward diplomacy, which, sometimes like I'm attacking somebody before we've declared war, or I think they're going to attack me, or something crazy like that. And those turns I definitely struggled with and like went back to, I think. But like if it's not some weird diplomatic shifting thing, then I probably just play it once. But
I keep on forgetting to do things and needing to quickly go and think, oh my God, I haven't set this up. I haven't done that.
Yeah.
Okay,
I haven't read on any turns. I just play it and send it.
Well, there you go. There's the professional for us.
Yeah.
We
The
need
next,
to stick over
the
that.
next turn comes, and then I think, why did they do that? I'm an idiot. And then I do it all over again. And then I get comments asking me why I'm such an idiot.
I think we all get there. All right, next question. So
I didn't get to answer yet.
oh, didn't you?
No. I'll make it quick because I ramble. I think I haven't revised any, but maybe like one turn, but I think it's because I've gotten better at it. And like I said, I make a decision immediately when I get my turn, and then I revise it the next day, and then I send it on email.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Wait, I did answer this question, didn't I?
You did. Yeah. I'm thinking, hang on.
I'm sorry. I'm an idiot.
I was thinking,
Leave your comments below.
who was the fifth member that answered it then?
Yeah, you're right. I'm an idiot. Sorry. It's a good thing I'm not trying to MC this thing.
That's all right. We'll let you go with it. Okay, so this next question is just a general Dominions question. So which Dom nation do you think is the most interesting to play? So Lucid, actually, and I'm probably actually really interested in your opinion more than anybody's, to be honest, because you play this game so much.
Yeah,
it's a big question, isn't it?
That's a tricky question. I know some of the best players will. First of all, the nations that are good for like really good players and the nations that are good for people just starting the game are often a lot different. Typically, like as you get more experienced, you want to have more options. Like options become increasingly valuable. Whereas if you're newer, having like one good solid strategy that you know how to do well is a really good thing to do. Like just focus on what you're good at. Like if you're the Niflheim Giants, just have a good bless, build the right items for your commanders, research the right things, buff your troops, and charge into battle. But then you get another nation like TNG where, you have access to every single magic path, right? So in theory, you can cast every spell in the game. Those are nations that have a lot richer kind of strategic options. And I think in Dominions 4, there was a multiplayer like tournament where it was a bunch of one-on-one, so diplomacy didn't factor in. And I think the person that actually won was TNG, and it was through some pretty sophisticated use of troops and spells and things like that. So I'm not a very good TNG player, but they're probably up there with being one of the better. Like if you know all the spells, you know all the strategies, you know which troops are good against what types of things, they're probably one of the better nations. I think the strongest nation in the game right now is probably Scalaria.
Okay. Yeah. I've never played that actually, so it was going to be interesting because I think that Sabouts was thinking about that, wasn't he, at one point?
He was going to do Lemuria, and then he switched to Pythium.
Scalaria is middle-aged, so he might have been deciding for Airmore. Should he play Airmore or Scalaria?
Yeah, that's right. He was thinking about that. That was for Dom 4. Yeah.
But
yeah.
But yeah, I would say if your nation has good access to communions, then you can kind of leverage yourself into almost any spell in the game. Because once you have like good communion mages, all you need to do is like find an independent mage that has one path in any, like nature or earth or fire, and then you just put a crystal matrix on them, which makes them a communion master, and then they can cast whatever spell you want.
I'm writing this down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am too. Thinking, God, how do I find a blood mage?
Yeah. Oh my god! If like that's one of the things. If I like playing Scaleria a lot, and I always bootstrap into Blood, which is where you have non-Blood commanders start blood hunting, and it's a really slow way to get slaves. But having Blood on a normal Communion nation is huge because on turn 5 you can just cast Reinvigoration as a Sabbath Master, and it will get rid of all the fatigue on all of your Communion slaves. So it's like after their whole initial script, they start off fresh. So it's a really good thing to do.
I thought that only affected the guy who cast it.
If he is the master of a communion, it also goes to all the slaves.
What?
Wow.
Yeah.
The documentation needs to be a little bit better. Like
It's in there. It's in the 600-page manual, man. You just have to read it all.
What? No, I don't even think it's in there.
I think it would be. I'd be surprised if it wasn't.
Huh.
The way you can tell for those is on any spell, if it says, like if you look in the mod inspector, y'all know what that tool is?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you look in there, or even in the spell description, if the target of the spell is self, then it will apply to the communion slaves. But for a lot of things like Body Ethereal or something, it's like a range 2 or 3 spell or something like that. It's a really short range spell. You normally cast it on yourself, but it's not, the target isn't self, like the target is ally. So anything where the target's ally, like where you cast it on someone else, it doesn't go to slaves. But anything where the target is self, like Bark Skin or Iron Skin. Yeah.
What?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Holy cow!
Okay, do y'all know about communion linebackers? Linebacker communions.
No?
I don't think I know anything.
Okay, I don't want to take this on a long detour, but this is the funniest mechanic I just have to tell you. It used to be a big thing in Dominions 3. You would have like a bunch of really strong but cheap communion slave chassis, like an Astral 1 Giant or something, right? And all they do is they just cast communion slave. Then you have a few different masters, and all the masters, they cast different self-buffing spells like Iron Skin, Temper Flesh, Astral Shield, everything. You end up getting like 20 buffs. They all go on the slaves, and the last thing you script for the masters is retreat. And once all the masters have retreated off the battlefield, then you have these like 20 giant communion slaves that then like wake up, and then they go kill everything.
Oh my god. That's incredible. I've never heard of that.
Yeah. You can't.
It doesn't
now what
work
happens?
anymore?
Well, it still works, but now what happens is when all the masters leave, the communion slaves all go into shock, where they have 200 fatigue, so they can't do anything. But if you put something on them like Soul Vortex or a bunch of reinvigoration things, they wake up pretty quick, and then they can still kill everything.
Wow. God, that's incredible. What an incredible game.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm done.
All right. Okay, so Nookrium.
Well, I haven't played a ton of nations. I've only played a few. But I'm really enjoying Statists. And I don't know if I can add on to that without spoiling anything, so I'm just going to leave it at that. There's a follow-up to Lucid.
Okay, so
Cloaked in
Wadestar.
secrecy.
One of the nations that I think still looks the most interesting, just to me, is the early age monkey nation. What are they called again?
Oh, Machaca.
Machaca, yeah. Just
I
don't know.
hate them.
But their commanders are really interesting to me, and all the summons they have. The other one that looked really cool was
I think you're talking about Kalisa. Kalisa. Machaca is the African nation. They're like the lion.
Yeah, that's right.
hyena.
That's right. Machaca is the spider riders.
Oh yeah. No, they're different. Yeah.
They become Bandar Log later. And then the other one, dang it, the middle age alternative to Vanheim that comes from Roos. Roos wasn't in Dom 4. Veneris.
Veneris, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, they look interesting too. Like I like the summon spells, especially if you can summon new sacreds. So that's the kind of thing that appeals to me. But my opinion's silly on this subject.
Well, I'm going to have to preface that and say that I'm the same. Actually, my criteria for these sort of nations is purely enjoyment, and nothing at all to do with how good the actual nation is. And which sort of sounds funny, but I just love my favourite nation out of all of Dominions is the Giants, basically, like the what is it, the Vanheim? No, not Vanheim, Jotunheim. I just always gravitate towards that. It's easy to play. It's great for beginners. You don't have to think much about it. You just pump out giants and ruffle stomp in single player. It's good fun.
Yeah,
That's pretty much it for me. I think it's a great nation for beginners. I also really like Ulm in the early and mid age as well, for the same reason. Just easy to play, no magic, or low magic anyway, and just move forward. Just nice and simple. So yeah, that's always a big criteria for me to actually try to pick nations that are fairly simple. And it's for me they're the two I really like. And actually, Vanarus I really do like as well. I did a recording on that and I really enjoyed it. So that's it. All right. So next round, we'll just get the next lot of cards dealt out. So Nookrium, there you go.
All right. So what do you think of the changes to the map editor or movement blocks that the AI can't understand? The research system, queue versus per turn research, the hiding of candles in favor of borders, and the recruitment point addition.
Okay, Wadestar, you kick off.
Okay. The map editor, I haven't had a chance to really mess around with, but I watched Daz's live stream when he made this map, so I think it seems a lot better. Let's see. So I'm going to skip that and let you guys talk about it. More movement blocks that the AI can't understand. Well, that would be too bad. The research system with the queue versus the per turn research is a huge improvement because it just takes away a certain amount of micromanagement that you always had to do in the previous version. And the sliders in the previous version, there was no point to it. Like you would just have research overflow in some other little area that was just wasted. Whereas now, like research overflow will go into the next thing that you're going to research. And realistically, there's no reason why you want to research two things simultaneously, because it's like, am I going to get 2 research upgrades in 20 turns, or am I going to get 1 in 10 turns and the next one in 20 turns? That's just simple math. Like, why would I want Conjuration 1 and Enchantment 1 in, for example, 20 turns, as opposed to getting Enchantment 1 in 10 turns and Conjuration 1 in 20 turns? It's no brainer. And that's what the new, I mean, correct my math if I'm wrong here, but that's the new implication, right, of this queue and having the, well, I mean, that's how you would research it even with the old research sliders. But like I said, sometimes you get a stupid overflow because you couldn't drag the stupid slider perfectly. And so it'd be like, oh, I need 100 more points, but I have to put in either 99 or 102. Like, anyway, I'm done ranting on that matter. The hiding of the candles in favor of the borders. So I hate that as a default. I always turn on the candles. I like the borders, but I have to have the candles. So for me, it's like the only thing I would say is like, I wish that the candles were on by default so I didn't have to go and actually, click a button to turn them on. But otherwise, as long as they didn't remove it from the game, it's fine. And the recruitment point addition, I think that's a good addition. Yeah, because I think it makes having castles in certain locations a little bit more of an interesting choice. Because otherwise you could just park a castle on a high resource province and just pump out every single troop you would ever need for your army there. Whereas now it's kind of like, well, you have to consolidate your armies a little bit more. So there's more logistics involved because you just can't turn one castle into your end-all be-all recruitment center. I think that's the implication there anyway.
Yep. Okay, you finished?
Yeah, I'm finished. Sorry.
You're not gonna forget that you've spoken.
Not this time.
Okay. All right. From my perspective, because I think Lucid was involved in the map making as well, like with that map that we sort of made. I don't know if you actually do any actual map making yourself, Lucid, but I think you said you were or did. So I don't know if I'm the only one that's actually made maps with the editor, but God, it's good now. Like it's when I first started doing it, there was a lot of with all the borders. We were talking about the borders in there. You've actually got to draw them in sort of separately anyway, and it was really a difficult process when they first brought the editor out. But now it's actually really, really good to use. Like I had to remake this map a few times with the borders, and the first time I had to do it all by hand, which is really time consuming. But the last time it was just a matter of a few minutes and it was all done. So no, it's a really good little editor actually, the way it sort of does work. So yeah, I'm sort of got my head around it. I quite like it. I don't understand the more movement blocks that the AI can't understand. I don't know what that would refer to. So I can't really comment on that. I don't know. I don't know if that means sort of like the mountain passes and the river passes and those sorts of things, and whether the AI just doesn't sort of take those into account. I'm really not sure. I'm not sure how that sort of does work. The next bit of it was the research system. I think that what you said, Wadestar, does sum that up. The hiding of candles, I agree that shouldn't be the default. And the recruitment point addition, I agree with you there as well. So pretty much I agree with everything that Wadestar said, except that I just add a little bit more onto the map editor. All right, so across to you, Lucid.
I'm working on one map. I've been working on it for like 6 months. I haven't released any yet though, but it'll be fun.
You got a monster map, haven't you, coming?
Yeah, it's huge. It's like 200 provinces. It's a big opened atlas laying on a table with like candles nearby. And then the problem with big maps is it's hard to get around them. So like if you can get off the map onto a candle, it's like a way to teleport kind of around the map. It'll be kind of cool. But
yep.
So, research system and improvement, hiding candles. I don't really have an opinion there, but if you hit 4, it will pop it up, like 4 on your keyboard. It will make the candles pop up.
I got to push a button. I don't want to push a button.
That should be on by default.
Yeah, but just for the viewers out there, if you want to see candles. It's actually really good when you're, like, in the beginning of the game, when you're expanding. If you hit 4, you can see the income of different provinces. So... it helps you make decisions on where you want to move to first. But and then recruitment points.
That should be on by default, shouldn't it? Really?
Yeah, probably. And then recruitment points. I don't know. I think it balanced out something, so I can see why they did it. I think it made it more complicated too, and the game's pretty complicated as it is. So I don't know if I would do that if I were the dev. But anyway, I'm okay with it.
Yep. Okay.
Well, I never played Dominions 4, so I will step out of this one.
Okay,
I didn't know that, Nucrium.
This is my first Dominions.
Is it really?
It is.
Wow, I didn't understand.
I mean, I'm an expert of the game, and remember that whenever you're playing in our match.
And this is your third favorite game.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, we know that we can take advantage of him.
Yeah, why are y'all ganging up on me? Go take his stuff and.
All right, so Wadestar, you've got your question.
All right, which strategy game do you think tends to produce the most interesting diplomatic situations with only AI players or with human players? This is from Circamus. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Okay, so I'm gonna punt to Daz.
Okay, so the most clearly Dominions, I think, is by far the deepest diplomatic game I've ever played. As far as other games to do with actual diplomacy, if I'm thinking really versus AI, because I do prefer to play single-player games, that is by far my preference for playing games. And diplomacy is always a real problem in a lot of different sorts of games where it just gets way, way too complex. And so I don't like complicated diplomacy. Just trying to think of games where I have enjoyed the diplomatic thing. And I'm thinking, once again, Age of Wonders is fairly simple, so I quite like that. I don't like it where you've got to guess whether the other person will actually, whether you've got to give them 2 extra gold and then they'll accept it or not. I don't like all that stuff that's sort of hidden. But I can't think of the actual games where that's a problem and the games where that's solved. Got a funny feeling that Gal Civ 3, I think, does a good job of that. I think from memory that I quite like the diplomacy in there. Also, the games, some of these fantasy games and space games, what are they called? They're put out by the same company. They're bits of unusual, a French company.
Like Endless.
Endless Legends, yeah, and Endless Space.
Amplitude.
Yeah, Amplitude Studios, yeah. And I quite like...
They're now owned by, I want to say, Sega?
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. But I think Amplitude is still actually sort of working fairly honestly. But I think that, once again, only from vague memories, because I haven't played the games for in a while, but I can remember the diplomacy being sort of fairly simple, and which I like in those sort of games as well. So, yeah, probably... I may be a bit confused about what I'm saying with that, but that's sort of where my head is at anyway. Okay, across to you, Lucid.
Yeah, I like probably Dominions for multiplayer diplomacy. I think it really blew my mind. I think the first real multiplayer Dominions game I was in, when I realized like the depth and the intrigue of the diplomacy. So I think bar none, best diplomatic game. For AI players, I generally don't like AI diplomacy. I think maybe Total War, Warhammer, the campaign has kind of interesting diplomacy. I feel there's, the cost of doing, like, you can invest in diplomacy and it can pay off. So that's probably one of the only strategy games where I find myself maybe spending some amount of time in the actual, diplomatic menus. But yeah, generally it's just which AI chooses to go to war with you and then you fight them. So, I don't know.
Yeah, single player AI games, diplomacy's terrible.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think that what you're saying, I remember that as well. Like, I think when there's a mechanic that you can actually, or a resource you can actually acquire to give you an advantage in diplomacy in single player games, I think that sort of works out quite well, because at least you know what you're doing. Whereas it's just such it's like shooting apples in a barrel, isn't it? Really, with in a lot of the games, you just don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about single player diplomacy games, you have to have like diplomacy points and stuff like that, or else it just doesn't work at all. Otherwise, it's like, hey, guess a number. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 1,000. How many gold pieces is it? It's like, that infuriates me. It's like, yeah, I call that 90s game thinking. It's like, this is a solved problem.
Yeah. Okay, Nookrium, what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, Dominions, the multiplayer diplomacy we have going on here is best multiplayer I've had so far. And yeah, single player. The only thing that comes to mind really would be like Civ. They always try to have a decent diplomacy system, but it doesn't usually work. A single player, I mean, very well. It ends up just being your best buds, alliances throughout the years, and then all of a sudden they hate you for some reason. Which may be how this Dominions game goes too, actually.
But the betrayal will sting so much worse when it's humans.
Yeah.
Okay, Wadestar?
Yeah, I think I gave my answer. I think everything you guys said.
Yep. Okay. So next question. Might clear up the board while we're thinking about this question. So this is a Dominions question from JB. Do you think Ilwinter depends too much on the community, such as the lack of non-player made maps? So non-player made maps. So basically, like, they didn't actually launch Dominions 5 with very many maps in it at all. And so I guess that's the question: is there too much reliance on the community? So Lucid, you can kick this one off.
I think there is. Like, Llama Server's great. The guy who puts it up is really phenomenal. It's better.
Lucid, you cut out for just a sec. You were saying okay. Llama Server?
Yeah, sorry. Llama Server is great. For those of you who don't know, it's what it's what we're hosting this game on. There's a few other kind of fan-made servers that you can do multiplayer games on, but there's issues with it. It goes down time to time. It's better than a lot of multiplayer servers that some game companies professionally develop. But I think if the real value of the game is in multiplayer, having a more streamlined multiplayer experience, I think would be pretty huge. And then I think the lack of good maps, some of the maps are so beautiful. Like Pie Mouse, who's one of the guys who made a lot of the maps that actually launched with Dominions now. I think they actually kind of contracted him to make some, but it's a really small team, and I think that's one of the things that makes this like a really special game. That it's like 2 devs, and they're not trying to like make a ton of money, and they're not trying to hire a big team. But I think if they strategically hired, or like even just contracted work with 2 or 3 people in the community, and maybe kind of brought it up a notch, like having more maps by Pymus, and they paid him, I think that would be awesome. I think, yeah, because I think the default Dominions maps are pretty freaking awful. The random map generator is bad. It's bad. Like the random map generator is unbalanced and it's ugly. So,
Yeah, I don't understand why there's not a like a built-in multiplayer as part of the game, like a built-in system for multiplayer, rather than having to go outside to the Llama server. You think by Dominions 5 they would have something set up within the game.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know the history of the game, it started, and Des, you'll know this. It wasn't on any of the game platforms to get, like, you couldn't buy it on Steam. You had to go buy it from their website or from Desura Games.
Shrapnel, actually, originally.
Oh yeah, from Shrapnel. And it took a long time for them to even get on any of the game platforms. And so, from that, they had almost no revenue, right? But I think now that they're on Steam and things like that, they're probably making a lot more money. So these things are kind of options for them. But before it wasn't even something they could think about. Just something they did for fun.
All right, Nookrium.
Yeah, that's my only comment is about the multiplayer built into the game. As far as like player-made maps, a lot of times when you have games that do offer that kind of support, it usually makes the game better, which it does. But yeah, I think Lucid has a good point. Maybe hiring on some or paying some folks to get some maps into the game or something like that would be probably a good addition.
Actually, it's I guess from your perspective as well. Like you've come in pretty fresh, and I guess the rest of it sort of played the games through different iterations. So it's your perspective on the game as someone that's new is actually really quite an important one, because really, if the game is to grow, it's people with limited experience that have to end up embracing it. So yeah. So for you, it's more the multiplayer. The lack of maps, did that bother you?
Yeah, the lack of, I've always used just the in-game random one, but yeah, having how much time would it take just to put a few maps in?
Yeah,
in the base game.
Well, with this map that we're playing on, I mean, Lucid was the one who actually say I forget what it's called now. There was an actual special map creator once again outside the game that did an incredible job of actually building the map. Like it was amazing what that did. I shudder to think what we would have ended up playing on if we had have used the in-game. So,
yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I sort of skipped across. Wadestar yet again. So, Wadestar.
Yeah, I have to say, so I'm going to counter a few, or I'm going to speak against a few of the things you guys said, but I will say from the very beginning, my first impression when I saw the paltry number of maps on Dominions 5 was I was like, oh, they were in a hurry to release this, because it was just like, how could you release this game without all the classic beautiful maps in Dominions 4? Like, what was the one, Volanus, the big crumbling like chunk that had an underground area and a top area? That's my favorite map. Glory to the Gods, like, was a beautiful map. Dawn of Dominions was a beautiful map. Like, these were maps that were in Dominions 1. How could you not include these in Dominions 5? And I think that's especially important to me because I was really on the fence about even buying Dominions 4 back at the time, but the maps were so beautiful that it was what allowed me to get past the other elements of the game that are weaker that people often complain about, which is the graphics, because the graphics, they're not great. But yeah, being able to play on a beautiful map is important. And in Dominions 5, the randomly generated maps look ugly. I don't want to look at it with my eyes. It's like listening to bad sound or something. It's like I don't enjoy looking at it. But having a map that is enjoyable to look at is so important, like the aesthetics. So that's what I'll say about the maps. However, for the multiplayer, I am kind of sympathetic to them because setting up making a game versus making a multiplayer game has some significant infrastructure implications. I can make a game and my product is digital. But if I make a multiplayer game, all of a sudden my product requires like physical infrastructure. Like I have to have a computer to host a server that my software can now connect to. That may also involve certain technological skills that are not in my wheelhouse, like being a being a 3D artist and a game developer, or being able to make games on Unity is completely different from being like a database administrator, because you're going to have a database for all your players. It's completely different from being like a network engineer, because you're going to have to set up a computer and all this other stuff. And even nowadays, it's a lot better than it was back, say, 10 years ago, even certainly 20 years ago, because now we have Amazon Web Services, or all this other cloud computing where you don't have to have the infrastructure. You just rent it from, like I said, Amazon. But you still have to know how IP addresses work and internet protocols. You have to be able to program this stuff, and not just the programming. A lot of it's just kind of like computer engineering. It's like stuff that I'm a programmer, and that stuff intimidates me. I have to go to it at work sometimes, but it's a big undertaking. So I think maybe that's one of the elements involved in it. And it would be nice if they could team up with the Llama server guy, but there's the other issue, well, how can they ask anything from him if they aren't going to pay him, and kind of vice versa. So it is kind of tricky. You have to start a company at that point. Whereas with two guys, it's different being in just a partnership, as opposed to now we got to start a company. And then finally, the only other reason why they may not bring in other people is because you also risk losing some control. So I just think of Dwarf Fortress, which is still run only by Toady, right? And that guy has been given many, many offers to have that software bought from him. And, it's oh, well, you'll still be involved in the game, but we just want to release Dwarf Fortress, through our studio or through our publisher. And think about it, we've got all these 3D animators and people who can bring your game to life. And yet he still doesn't do it. And why doesn't he do it? It's because he wants to maintain, I think anyway, I shouldn't speak for him, but I think it's because he wants to maintain creative control. So I think that's the other issue too, is that if they tried to branch out and bring in more people, they might also then lose some control of the game. So yeah, as long as people are doing stuff voluntarily, it's kind of they get to still delineate what is theirs versus what is just voluntary work, which, yeah. Anyway, I think I've made my point.
Yep, no, good points, actually. It's I sort of, for me, it's actually, Dominions is a massive passion project for a lot of different players and their community as well. It was really interesting because I got in on the end of, because I had to do some videos, or was asked to do some videos for the launch, and I got to sort of see the beta testing, and that was great to sort of see how they did it. Llama server, for example, is so tightly knitted in with what the devs are doing as well. It's just a really, really cool community. And I think that they wouldn't be wanting to, in one sense, as you say, because they're not really mainstream, but because it's such a niche game, that passion and that community that they've actually got going is something that's worth a lot more than what we give credit for as well. So I think we've got to sort of take that into account. So there's an awful lot a lot to consider, I guess, from their perspective, and everybody does, willingly sort of give their time. And the people that you sort of see involved in this, in the Dominions community, are people that have been involved with it for years and years and years. You see the same names just coming up, year after year after year. I mean, there's a few names that could have gone missing over the years. I don't want to sort of say names there on this, but I always wonder what actually happened to them. I wonder whether they're okay, or because they don't lose this community that they've actually built up doesn't disappear and go off and do other things. They stay with Dominion. So yeah, I guess I'm sort of getting off the thing about the non-player made maps. I was also surprised at the lack of the maps. I think that they should have, particularly now that they've actually really fleshed out that map building tool, they should be making the winter versions of all of those maps and getting them in. But I've got a funny feeling maybe they are also have been built by the community and just sort of added into the game at certain points. So whether that's a licensing issue, I'm just not sure.
Well,
But,
you can get those. You can get those maps. So like Parganos is a favorite. Glory to the Gods, Volantis, all of those maps. You can get them if you look for them, but
yeah,
it'd be nice to have it in the game.
It's just not packaged. Yeah, it's not packaged. So anyway, guys, we've been going for an hour and a quarter, and we've still got 12 questions left. I've got to leave in half an hour, so we're probably only going to get through maybe 2 more questions. So how should we do this? We did actually have one question we specifically wanted to test. Should we just do one more question, and then we'll just manually, I'll find the other question that we were going to wanting to go through, and do it that way?
Works for me.
All right. So Nookrium, we'll deal across to you. So and then I'll just go and start searching for that other question. Unless this is it, this may be the one.
Okay, for the YouTubers that's solely focused on Dominions, what keeps you guys producing content, as it isn't the most popular of games? I have to step out of this one because that's not me.
It's really lucid, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I guess. Okay. I'm not really doing it to... Like, I didn't decide I want to be, like, a YouTube game streamer or anything in particular. I'm just doing it for fun. I think too, it's probably like, I think Wadestar said he kind of got into multiplayer by watching some other people's videos, and I think that's how I did too. And then also by reading like Baal's Guide, B-A-A-L-Z, however you say that. But he had these awesome guides that he would write for Dominions 3. I don't think he's really part of the community anymore, but yeah, I think I just wanted to kind of share that with other people. So I'm not really doing it to have like a big following. I already have like way more subscribers than I thought I'd ever have. So just doing it for fun.
Yeah, you've actually got more subscribers than I do now, and I don't exclude myself to Dominions, so that's saying something, isn't it?
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, these games, I think that what happens with the subscribers to if a gaming community embraces you, you do tend to pick up a lot of subscribers from that one community. And Dominions is certainly such a passionate community that it's not really surprising for somebody who does specialize in it like this. So, yeah. So the rest of us, I'm not going to answer that question. I'm not in that category.
Yeah, I'll pass on that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go across Wadestar. We'll do one more question. I've got the other question. We'll do that one last.
Okay, so I'll read this one real quick. This is from the same person, the Dankest Dungeon Azuriel. Any new concepts or additions that you'd like to see be added to the game?
Okay, any new concepts or additions? I think we've sort of spoken a little bit about like having a cleaner multiplayer sort of environment and making it easier for new players. I think that's always something that's so critically important. They've done great jobs with getting the like when you're sort of creating a game now to be able to go and see what units are available, what bless effects are available, and all those sorts of things. I'd love to see almost like a mod inspector put into the game as well. I'd love that. That's probably the one thing I would love to sort of see, just where you can actually do all of that research in game while you're playing. So the more of that goes into the game, the better. So that's pretty really it from me from that side. Okay, across to you, Lucid.
Yeah, that would be at the top of my wish list too. Yeah, probably just a cleaner multiplayer. That would be my top one.
I think, yeah, having some sort of multiplayer option, obviously, set up within the game, and yeah, that pretty much. Single player diplomacy. That's what I wanted to say. Because multiplayer diplomacy is great, but there's not really much of. There is no single player diplomacy in the game. It's your war with everyone, and so adding some sort of a, diplomacy type system into the single player game would be great.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah.
One feature I'd like to see added is if when you do play a single player game, if you can get the AI to incorporate pretenders that you've created, so that it's not just randomly making some pretender, like make an effect, like so you can make an effective pretender for a certain nation or several effective pretenders from a nation using the mod tools, and then tell the AI like make a random pretender, or pick from my pre-created pretenders, or exclusively pick randomly from my pre-created pretenders, or pick specifically this pre-created pretender. So that way you can, like I want to play against a pretender that's going to have this specific kind of bless for his blessed troops, and then you'll play the AI against them like that. So I'd like to see that. I would like to see. I would like to see a better victory point system, but I've talked about that in Dominions 4. I'm so glad that they introduced the Cataclysm at the very least, but it would be kind of nice. There are just some things they could do to improve that, even like make it so that the Cataclysm isn't guaranteed maybe to start on a given turn, but within 1 or 2 turns of the turn that you've set it on. But that's okay because the Cataclysm's already kind of random anyway. But I'd also like to just see like an accumulated victory point condition. But like I said, I've talked about that exhaustively before for Dominions 4, so my opinion there is the same. And then finally, they've took this out of Dominions 4, and I want it put back into Dominions 5. I want my battle music interludes. When a battle starts, I want the music to change, and then when I leave the battle, I want the music to go back to like the overworld music. I don't like it that it just plays the music continuously on like a loop. So I just turned the music off now.
Yep. It's interesting points, actually. The game set up, I hadn't really thought of that, but really it's there's so much that they could do with that. They almost need to have like because if you randomize your commander, it's not really like in an AI game. It's not really all that great, is it? The actual random commanders that it actually does generate. Be great if there was actually like a library of different commanders that they could actually access.
Yeah, a couple things on that. One thing you can do is if you want to kind of do it, what Wadestar was talking about in this current version, you can set everybody to a human player, and then you can load your pretender for each player, and then the first turn for those players, you just set them to AI as an option. Yeah. Like you play each of them. It's
hard work though.
Yeah, it is.
And that's good too. I mean, yeah, I thought of that as well. The only thing I miss is like if I want to have it be a surprise, I can't get the random pick is all.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say is they were supposed to have done that in Dominions 5, where it's supposed to pick, like, I think it did truly random things in Dominions 4, where you just get random paths kind of on the pretender. And I think in 5, I don't know how they did it, but I know in the release notes they said they made it where it picked blesses better, or like pretender paths.
Yeah.
It does do a better job, but there's still a bit of randomization there. I think that it would be, if there was actually scripted, if the community actually put together like a whole library of different commanders that each faction could pick from, with the bless effects, the whole lot, that'd be pretty interesting, actually.
Do you know what would be really cool if they just took all of the pretenders that had been submitted to Llama server and they just put those in a big hidden database that they backed up into the game?
Yeah. Actually, that's true. That'd be good.
Yeah, and then cross-reference that to the stats for who won the game.
Yeah. All right, so last question. So this will be the one. So regarding our multiplayer series, I'm interested in how you all feel about the differences it makes restricting diplomacy to the in-game communication system, which is obviously very slow from game account. Lucid, across to you.
Okay. So I sent a little bit to the group out about how it's frustrating me. I think it's okay. I like it in the sense that it makes a better narrative when we're putting up YouTube videos, because you get to see all of it. It's not as just saying, oh, I had a conversation in Discord or Steam with someone. I think when you combine the in-game only diplomacy with role-playing, it makes it really tricky because you don't really know what the other person is saying. You kind of have to decode it. And
Wadestar.
Well, with Wadestar, you just have no idea. You just put on your crazy voice, you try to read it, and then when you're done, you say, okay, I don't know what he said. But I think it actually loses some of the diplomatic edge when you do it that way. And I think I'm going to stop role-playing, for most of the rest of it. Because a lot of the diplomacy is actual threats of violence, or like saying, okay, well, if you don't do this, then this is what I'm going to do, or something like that. And if you put that in like coded role playing, and the other person doesn't get it, then it's a kind of failed message. So, like an example, I was in a game. I'm actually going to upload it to my channel, so this will be a bit of a spoiler. But I was playing Scalaria, and I was fighting Yis, and Yis was all over. Yis is a land and water nation, and so they were all attacking somebody, eating all their stuff. And they told me if I attack them, they're going to be forced to pull everything into the water to come defend me, and by doing that, they're going to give all their land to the biggest nation. And that was, that's the diplomacy, and it was true. I knew he would do that, and it ended up later in the game, I had to fight that bigger nation, which ended up being a huge problem because they did get all Yis's land. So, but that was the compelling threat for me to not attack Yis. So anyway, I think, the in-game diplomacy is fine, but I think you have to take advantage of like every single turn's worth of messages, because if Yis was communicating that to me in flowery language, and to me it just seemed like he was getting upset about, he was going to lose, I wouldn't really necessarily understand that the big nation in the game was going to get all his land, and that was going to be a huge problem for me. It would have impacted my decision making anyway. So
actually, I think the point of the question was actually because we lose, because it's instead of doing it through email or another method, is it? I think the question is more about using the in-game diplomacy rather than the email diplomacy. So,
but Lucid was talking about that a little bit too, like because he also talks to people in those games off channels as well.
Yep.
Yeah, well, okay, so there's two things. I think, I kind of shifted it to talking about like the role-playing side versus the in-game part. The thing, like what I do in a lot of my games is I'll do role-playing stuff in-game, and then any confusion will eliminate off-game in like a negotiation in a Steam chat or something like that. Like we'll do the actual bartering. And that's kind of what's missing. Like, like Midgard sends me a message saying he's going to attack me. I don't know if he's going to. I assume he is, so I attack him because it seems like it, And then I can't, but it was a flowery, weird Midgard message. Like, how the hell am I supposed to know what he's going to do? It's in some weird Viking. So I don't have the Steam channel to go to and say, hey, what the hell did this mean?
Yeah.
So it makes it interesting, but it's frustrating.
Yeah, it's vague enough to keep it interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, Nookrium, what's your perspective?
I'm the exact opposite. I like that it's vague and that and the other thing is because I'm one of the new guys to this group. Some of you have been around for a while. 2 of you have, I guess. And so there may be some sort of, buddy systems going behind the scenes otherwise. But this way, if all chat has to be within the system, there's enough vagueness to it that maybe those bondings will fall apart, I guess. Know what I mean?
Yep.
And and the vagueness, the other thing kind of annoying about it is it takes so long to get a message back. So you may say, hey, how about a truce? But by the time they get that truce message, they've already, there's already been more fights going on. And you never know, is the truce message still going to last? Because we've been taking each other's territories here. So, but
Yep. By the time you send a message and get it back, it's more than a week.
Oh yeah, way over a week.
Yeah, and to Lucid's points, like first of all, like none of us have to do role playing voice, so like that stuff is totally up to each player, and I want it to be that way too. So like for people like Lucid who just need to get a certain message across, like I hope that in the game nobody feels like they have to role play, because that's just not the case. I don't want that to be a mandatory part of the game. And then in terms of like being able to interpret it, like I've talked about this to my viewers in the videos, and I think there is a risk when you choose to write like I'm writing in the game. And I tell my viewers too, I'm like, well, this may cost me. Like if he can't understand what I'm saying to him, I'm like, well, I hope he understands what I'm saying, but if he doesn't and this happens, well, I guess that's my fault. So, but I'm just willing to go with it. So yeah, I'm sorry, Lucid, about I'm sorry I haven't been very clear with you. I wouldn't go so far as to say that's by design, but I would say that I embrace the consequences of my diplomacy in this game. And but I will not conflate something like, I am trying to be careful not to conflate something like a non-aggression pact. So
Yeah.
like there is some vocabulary that
It's
I'm
about
doing,
sorry.
or like there is some vocabulary I'm trying to adhere to, and part of that too is just because I don't want to inadvertently betray anybody. So like I said before, like it's sometimes I'm not even sure who my what my alliance status is with some people, but you know, like I feel kind of like, well, if it happens, it happens. And even if I were speaking in plain speech, like I also would want to say to anybody else who hypothetically could have been in the game, even if you do give somebody like, I'm going to agree to your 3-month non-aggression pact, I would still want them to be able to feel like they could betray that and just be like, well, the game doesn't have any strict rules for diplomacy. Like there are some games that are like that, where like you click a button to 10 turns of peace and the game will not let you attack anybody. And Dominions doesn't do that. And I would like to be able to honor people who play that way too. And you know, it's like if you want to be a total unreliable backstabber, that's allowed. But no,
Yes.
everything else you said, I totally would agree with. It's just that to be callous, I don't care. I'm just going to do it anyway. I'm just going to be difficult anyway, just for my own amusement. Even though it is, as I said to my viewers, I do see it as a liability, but a liability for exactly what you said.
I don't want to take any ale away from the Vikings, so.
But I've thought about it too, but it's like, oh man, what am I going to do if it like is exactly important that I make sure this person understands exactly what I'm saying? I'm like, well, when that comes, then I'll just have to tell them out of character, but still sticking to the in-game diplomacy.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. And I know that Wadestar, you know, like over the series, it's been something where we've been very, very careful to try to actually split out of character and in character as two very distinct areas that we deal with, because if you're dealing with something where you're using an out of character voice, it's you, the person, doing it. And whereas in game, if you are using an in character voice, then at least you can do anything and it's not a reflection on your own character. So that's something I think that like, you know, over the series, it's been a very important aspect of the diplomacy. But as you say, you don't have to do it if you don't want to. Yeah, so it's I know that in the last series, the in character versus out of character was really quite a distinct discussion that was sort of had over a large portion of that game, whereas this hasn't really hit that at all. It's I think it sort of found its own level in this particular game. So in that sense, I'm happy to just keep everything in character because it gives me more options to do things that I wouldn't do. I can do stuff not as me, but as you know, as the actual character playing the game by doing that. So for me, it gives me more flexibility inside the game. I think it also makes for better videos as well. It allows you also to then sort of make up excuses about doing things.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that there's different ways you can use it. And but for me, the big thing with keeping it all in game is losing that turn. Losing the turn where you send a message, they receive it next turn, they then draft their message and then send it back. And there's already, and I don't want to talk about it because we can't really discuss what's happening in game, but there's already been a number of instances where this has really impacted in a really different way. And it's led to decisions being made by all sorts of players, to be honest, where they've actually had to second guess not a move ahead, but 2 moves ahead. And that for me is really interesting. So I really like it. I've got to say I really like it because it's making the game much more difficult from a diplomatic perspective, having that 2-turn lag rather than an email where you can actually sort of collude and then make your decision and then sort of move forward in the same thing. It's really interesting. So you know, it's sort of but for me that's something that I value, even though it's can actually bite you.
Well, and it keeps us from getting into like a diplomatic stalemate, which I felt we had in our last game for a long time, and goes back to the point that Lucid made earlier about, a perfect game of diplomacy never ends.
Yeah.
So that's the big thing that I think it does bring, is that like it does lead to situations where it's like you aren't maybe sure and you make a move because of a message you got, and you don't have time in real life to go back and check with the person to see what's happening. So you know what? I guess I have to just go on this message, so I'm going to do this. But that's what makes the game actually go forward, because if nobody ever attacked anybody because everybody's negotiating behind the scenes, we get bogged down.
Yeah, what may be interesting actually would be to have like, and this wouldn't really be workable, but I'm just thinking if there was a way that you could actually send it an email when you return, send an email to send it to, and they reply in game, so that it comes back in the actual game. At least you don't lose a turn. But I quite like it, to be honest. I do quite like having this 2-turn lag. It's going to mean that there's going to be some massive opportunities for players to do things inside those 2 turns at some point in the game. So that's it from me.
Do you guys have any more you want to add? Lucid or Nucrium?
Nope, I don't think so.
The only other point I wanted to add about that just escaped my mind as I was speaking.
Okay. Well, anyway, there's a few messages that we didn't get through. I really like this roundtable setup. Actually, it feels good. I think we should do it again. So maybe we keep these questions aside and get some more questions and do it again. In a few weeks' time. What do you guys think?
At least when we do our end game, and we should get a chance to get the other guys in too.
Yeah. Well, the end game is different again, because that's really going to be where we can talk about the game. I mean, the whole idea of having the questions was because we couldn't talk about what we were doing in the game, and which meant that we had nothing to really talk about. So it sort of I think it worked out quite nicely having the questions before the end of the game actually to do it like this. So
yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe we'll just keep tabs on which questions weren't actually answered, and then we'll go through and sort of put them into the mix of whatever questions we get for next time. And we sort of as you say, there's other players that weren't involved in this one. We can do the same sort of thing there. The idea is, I think a few of us are going to be uploading this to our channel in about, by the time you see it, it won't be in 24 hours, but we'll be coordinating the upload so that whoever has been recording this will actually put it on their channel. So if you want to go from channel to channel, you'll probably see the same sort of mini podcast.
Well, the other reason we're recording redundantly too is just in case there's audio issues.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching. Sign out.
All right.
If you guys.
See you all.
Yep.
All right. See you guys later.